The county auctioneer laughed before he read the description. Not because the land was valuable, because everyone already knew the property. 82 acres. He glanced at the file. Former Thompson farm. He paused, completely overgrown with kudzu. A few people chuckled. The auctioneer continued. Access road blocked. No usable structures visible. Sold for unpaid back taxes. He looked around the room. Opening bid. Nobody raised a paddle. The Thompson place had disappeared years ago. Not figuratively. Literally. Kudzu vines swallowed everything. Telephone poles vanished beneath green walls. Oak trees looked like giant bushes. Fence lines disappeared. The old county road dead-ended in vines so thick that even deer avoided them. Another minute passed. Still no bids. The auctioneer sighed. Any interest? Margaret Hale quietly lifted her bidder's card. I'll take it. Every head turned. Dale Harper leaned back in his chair. You're buying kudzu. Margaret smiled. I don't think so. 3 taps of the gavel echoed across the courthouse. The forgotten Thompson farm belonged to her. Outside, Nathan unfolded the survey map. 82 acres. He looked toward the distant hills. And nobody's seen the middle of it in 25 years. Margaret nodded. That's what interests me. Nathan laughed. Not the kudzu. She smiled. The kudzu's temporary. The first trip to the property took almost 2 hours. Not because it was far, because they couldn't reach it. The old entrance road had vanished beneath vines nearly 10 feet deep. Telephone wires disappeared into curtains of green. Entire trees bent beneath the weight. Nathan climbed onto the truck bumper. I've never seen anything like this. Margaret looked carefully along the hillside. Kudzu climbed everything. Old fence posts, power poles, rock piles, dead trees, living trees. Even abandoned machinery hidden beneath the vines formed strange green hills. Most people saw disaster. Margaret saw feet. When she was 13, Samuel Hale parked beside an abandoned railroad line completely covered with kudzu. She stared through the windshield. It swallowed everything. Samuel smiled. What do goats eat? She frowned. Everything. He laughed. Almost. He pointed toward the endless green vines. They especially love that. She looked surprised. Kudzu. He nodded. One person's nightmare. He smiled. Another farmer's hayfield. Years later, Margaret attended a regenerative grazing conference. One speaker specialized in invasive plant control. No chemicals. No bulldozers. No burning. Only goats. Photographs showed impossible hillsides before and after grazing. Dense green walls transformed into healthy grasslands. Margaret filled another notebook. One sentence remained circled. Goats don't see invasive plants. They see lunch. Standing before 82 acres of kudzu. She remembered every word. The county heard about it immediately. Naturally. Saturday morning the diner bust. Dale Harper folded his newspaper. You hear what Margaret bought? Rick looked up. What now? The Thompson jungle. Several farmers laughed. The kudzu place? Dale nodded. She's putting goats on it. Another rancher grinned. Good. They'll disappear before the vines do. The room erupted. Margaret walked inside carrying mineral blocks. Dale waved. Morning. Morning. He smiled. So. She laughed. So. How's the jungle? It's greener than I expected. More laughter. What are you planning to grow? Margaret smiled. Grass. The room laughed even harder. Nobody believed grass still existed underneath. Back at the property, portable electric fencing divided the first 5-acre section. Nathan opened the livestock trailer. Nearly 150 Spanish and Kiko cross goats burst into the vines. They barely touched the grass. Instead, they stood on their hind legs pulling leafy kudzu vines downward. Others climbed fallen trees completely wrapped in vegetation. Within hours, patches of brown stems appeared. Nathan laughed. They're eating the ceiling. Margaret smiled. They always start with the leaves. The first month looked almost unchanged. Then everything accelerated. Without leaves, the vines weakened. Sunlight reached the ground for the first time in decades. Native grasses immediately began emerging. Wildflowers appeared. Young oak seedlings surfaced from beneath the tangled vines. The extension grazing specialist visited 6 weeks later. He stood quietly. I expected dead soil. Margaret smiled. What do you see? He knelt. Earthworms. Native grasses. Healthy soil. The seed bank had survived all those years. It was waiting. Nathan smiled. For sunlight. Samuel had once written something similar. Nature forgets very little. She simply waits longer than we do. Every week, another grazing section opened. The goats advanced like a slow green harvest. Behind them, the land reappeared. Stone fence lines emerged. Old cedar posts. Creek crossings. Rock walls no one remembered. Even an abandoned orchard slowly returned. One afternoon, Nathan noticed something unusual. He called Margaret. "Come here." She climbed through a freshly cleared section. At first she saw nothing. Then, a line of perfectly stacked limestone, almost hidden beneath vines. She brushed away loose leaves. The stones continued downhill. Too straight to be natural. "What do you think?" Nathan asked. Margaret smiled. "A foundation." They marked the location. The goats continued working around it. 2 weeks later, another surprise emerged. An old iron hand pump. Bent. Rust-covered. Still standing. Nathan stared. There was definitely a house. Margaret nodded. But where? The county historian visited after hearing about the discoveries. He carried yellowed plat maps from the early 1900s. Standing beside the old pump, he studied them carefully. "You've uncovered the original farmyard." He pointed farther uphill. "The farmhouse should be." He stopped. "Right there." Margaret looked toward what appeared to be another hill covered entirely with kudzu. Only it wasn't shaped quite like a hill. Too square. Too symmetrical. Nathan frowned. "You think that's it?" The historian nodded slowly. "I think you're looking at the roof." The next grazing paddock surrounded the mysterious mound. The goats attacked eagerly. Leaves vanished. Then vines. Then thick stems. Every day another piece appeared. First, one chimney. Then a porch railing. Then 2 upstairs windows. Within 3 weeks an entire roofline emerged from beneath the vegetation. Nathan stood speechless. "I can't believe it." Neither could the historian. He quietly removed his hat. "I've driven past this property for 30 years. He looked toward the slowly reappearing farmhouse. "I honestly thought the house had collapsed decades ago. It hadn't. The kudzu had simply hidden it." As autumn arrived, nearly 60 acres stood cleared. Native grasses rolled across hills that had looked hopeless only months earlier. The abandoned orchard blossomed back to life. Wild turkey flocks returned. Quail nested beneath recovering grass. The old farmhouse slowly emerged from its green prison. Its stone chimney still stood perfectly straight. Its weathered porch remained intact. Even several original windows survived beneath the vines. Late one October afternoon, the county structural engineer drove onto the property after hearing rumors of the discovery. He slowly walked around the newly uncovered farmhouse, tapped the foundation with a hammer, examined the stone walls, looked into the attic. Nearly an hour passed before he climbed back onto the porch. He turned toward Margaret, then smiled. "I've got a question." Margaret folded her arms. "Go ahead." He looked back at the forgotten farmhouse, standing proudly beneath the last hanging curtains of kudzu. "Do you realize this house may be in far better condition than anyone imagined after 25 years hidden beneath those vines?" The county structural engineer climbed down from the attic. He brushed dust from his hands. Then he looked toward Margaret. "Do you realize this house may be in far better condition than anyone imagined after 25 years hidden beneath those vines?" Margaret glanced back at the weathered farmhouse. "I hoped it had survived." The engineer smiled. "It did more than survive." Nathan looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" "The kudzu hid it." He pointed toward the roof. The vines looked destructive. He tapped one of the thick stone walls. But they also shaded the house from decades of direct sunlight. He walked across the porch. "The foundation is solid. The chimney is sound. Most of the framing is still remarkably straight." Margaret smiled. "So the vines buried it." He nodded. "But they also protected parts of it." The restoration began carefully. Nobody rushed. The goats finished clearing every remaining patch of kudzu surrounding the farmhouse. Workers removed only dead vines clinging to the walls. Native grasses quickly replaced the green blanket that had covered the property for decades. The abandoned orchard continued recovering. Old pear trees appeared, then peach trees. Even a forgotten grape arbor emerged beside the house. The county historian arrived carrying another stack of maps. "I found something." Margaret looked over. "What?" He unfolded a faded survey from 1912. This wasn't just a farmhouse. Nathan leaned closer. "What else?" The historian pointed towards several faded pencil markings. "Blacksmith shop. Smokehouse. Root cellar." He smiled. "And a spring house." Margaret looked across the clearing. "So they're all still here?" He nodded. "Hidden." The goats continued moving across the remaining acreage. Every week another piece of history appeared. Stone walkways. A hand-built well curb. Sections of split-rail fencing. An old windmill tower lying beneath tangled vines. Nothing had disappeared. It had simply waited. Late one afternoon, Nathan noticed a line of unusually green grass leading downhill from the farmhouse. He followed it. The goats had already stripped away the last vines. Half buried beneath leaves sat a beautiful stacked stone spring house. Cold water still flowed gently through it. Nathan laughed. "You've got to see this." Margaret walked down the hill. The spring ran as clear as glass. Ice cold, even after decades. The structural engineer smiled when he saw it. That's why the house lasted. Margaret looked surprised. The spring. He nodded. The owners built everything around reliable water. The county extension specialist visited during the second spring. He slowly walked across the restored fields. Native grasses waved in the breeze. Wildflowers covered the hillsides. Quail called from fresh hedgerows. Butterflies drifted through blooming clover. He stopped beside Margaret. "I've got to admit something." She smiled. "What?" "I thought kudzu killed everything." Margaret knelt and picked up a handful of rich black soil. It covered everything. She smiled. "That's different." The specialist looked around. "So the land wasn't ruined?" "No. It was hidden." That sentence quietly spread through the county. By the third summer, the former Thompson farm barely resembled the abandoned property sold at auction. The restored farmhouse overlooked rolling pastures filled with grazing goats. The old orchard produced fruit once again. The spring house supplied fresh water. Historic stone fences stretched across hillsides that nobody had seen in a generation. The county tourism board asked permission to include the farm on its annual heritage tour. Margaret agreed. Visitors arrived from across the state. Some came to see the goats. Others came to see the farmhouse. Most simply wanted proof that the stories were true. One little boy stood beside the enormous pile of dried kudzu vines stacked after the restoration. He looked toward the green hills. Did the goats really eat all that? Margaret laughed. They certainly tried. What was under it? She smiled. An old farm waiting to breathe again. The audience smiled with him. Even Dale Harper became a regular visitor. One evening he leaned against the restored porch railing. "You know what still bothers me?" Margaret smiled. "What?" I laughed. "You did. I told everybody you bought 82 acres of weeds." She looked across the rolling pasture. "You weren't the only one." He shook his head. "I thought the land was finished." Margaret looked toward the goats, quietly browsing another patch of young brush. "It never was." "What changed?" She smiled. "We finally removed what was hiding it." The State Agricultural University soon established demonstration plots across the property. Researchers documented native plants returning after the kudzu disappeared. Bird populations nearly tripled. Soil health improved dramatically. Even the old orchard produced heritage fruit varieties rarely seen anymore. One graduate student asked Margaret, "When did you know there would be a farmhouse underneath?" She smiled. "I didn't." The student looked surprised. "You didn't." "I knew there had once been a family here." She looked toward the restored porch. "If families build a farm," she smiled, "they usually built it well." Late one autumn, the county organized its annual Farm Preservation Awards. The restored Thompson farm received the highest recognition. During the ceremony, the county commissioner laughed quietly. "I still remember auction day." Margaret smiled. "So do I. We thought we were selling 82 hopeless acres." She looked toward the green hills rolling behind the farmhouse. "You were." The commissioner looked confused. She smiled. "Hopeless until someone looked underneath." That evening, Margaret sat alone on the restored front porch. The sun settled behind the hills. Goats grazed peacefully across lush pastures. The old orchard glowed with autumn colors. Cold spring water still flowed through the stone spring house exactly as it had generations earlier. She remembered the first day she stood at the gate. All she could see was an endless wall of kudzu. Everyone else saw weeds. Expense. Failure. A property nature had reclaimed forever. Margaret saw something different. She knew invasive vines rarely create emptiness. They simply hide what already exists. She never expected the farmhouse to remain standing. She never imagined an entire homestead would emerge from beneath the green blanket. She simply believed that healthy land and good craftsmanship can wait patiently for someone willing to uncover it. By the fifth year, visitors no longer referred to it as the Kudzu farm. They called it the restored Thompson homestead. Children ran through orchards that had once disappeared beneath vines. Families toured the stone spring house. Researchers studied the recovering ecosystem. The goats still browsed every new patch of kudzu before it could reclaim the hills. Margaret smiled every time someone called the transformation remarkable, because the greatest discovery had never been the farmhouse. It was realizing that beneath years of neglect, the land had never stopped remembering exactly what it was meant to become.